Hi, this is Miss Michael, and we're going to talk about the theory of evolution from Charles Darwin, natural selection, adaptations, and variations. Charles Darwin wrote Origin of Species. And this was a culmination of his findings when he traveled to the Galapagos Islands. And there were three main ideas that were discussed in his works. One being that organisms surviving long enough to reproduce allows a population of organisms to pass on favorable traits. Over time, the favorable traits in the population are going to increase in frequency, and these traits or change is a change in response to the environment, and this is all called natural selection. So, key phrases: surviving and reproducing. Okay, natural selection is um, when organisms have traits that have the ability for that organism to survive and reproduce, and the organism with this trait or that trait will increase in the population. So they need to have what is said to be evolutionary fitness. And evolutionary fitness is an organism's capacity to survive and reproduce. So when we talk about fitness, when we talk about evolutionary fitness, we're talking about an organism's ability to survive and reproduce. Um, Adaptations. So organisms have variations. A variation can be color. It can be, if we're talking about birds, it could be a beak shape, or um, it could be something that the organism has that's just slightly different from another organism in that species. Adaptations are traits or variations that allow an organism to increase or decrease its fitness. So, species develop behaviors or traits in response to the environment, and then these traits that are as a result of responding to the environment are adaptations. Now, adaptations are not acquired; they actually originate from genetics, and they can be passed from parent to offspring. So, adaptations are things that allow organisms to have evolutionary fitness. So, we're going to look at a short film that gives us examples of specific adaptations that you guys have a better idea of what adaptations are.
Did you know that dogs are actually descendants of wolves? Long ago, people began domesticating wolves, gradually transforming them from wild animals into hunting partners and companions. Through the domestication process, wolves adapted to live with humans. Though a happy, friendly dog is a far cry from a fierce wolf, dogs still possess many of the adaptations that allow wolves to thrive in the wild. Welcome to Moo Moo Math and Science and Adaptations. Adaptations are traits that increase or decrease the fitness of an organism. In other words, adaptations help or hinder the ability of an organism to survive. Adaptations are genetically controlled and therefore can be passed on to successive generations. Let's take a look at some examples of adaptations from different types of organisms. Desert plants live in harsh environments where water is scarce. As a result, desert plants have many adaptations that enable them to collect or retain water efficiently. For example, some desert plants have short root systems that spread out over wide areas to collect as much water as possible during rainstorms. Most desert plants have waxy leaves that retain water inside the plant and prevent the water from evaporating in the hot sun. The human body also presents many adaptations. For example, humans have a large number of sweat glands that allow us to cool off and survive in hot environments. In high altitude locations where oxygen levels are low, it appears that humans' bodies can evolve over time to use more oxygen more efficiently. While most people would feel sick in the Tibetan mountains due to lack of oxygen, the bodies of the Tibetan people are oxygen converting machines. A euglena is a single celled protist. These little protists adapted to become mixotrophs, meaning they can act as an autotroph and a heterotroph. Autotrophs are capable of producing their own food from inorganic substances. Euglena are photoautotrophs, which means they have chloroplasts that allow them to carry out photosynthesis and make food from sunlight. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, must eat other organisms for food. Euglenas are also classified as heterotrophs because they feed on living organisms such as bacteria or algae. Sloths are famous for moving slow and hanging out in trees. They also have many adaptations that increase their fitness. For example, they have an extremely slow metabolism. Sloth's diet primarily consists of leaves. Leaves do not contain much energy, but a sloth's slow metabolism enables the sloth to store energy from its food for long periods of time. In addition, leaves are hard to digest, but sloths have a complex stomach that breaks down and ferments leaves efficiently. Owls are very successful birds of prey with many helpful adaptations. Here's a brief list. Their feathers are designed for silent flight. Their eyes are full of rods, which gives them extraordinarily good night vision. They have tufts that resemble twigs and branches. And finally, they have the ability to turn their heads 270 degrees in each direction. You can't sneak up on an owl. Quick reminder, an adaptation is any inheritable trait that increases an organism's ability to survive and reproduce.
In its environment. Okay, I'm going to leave that up there for a moment. So if you want to go ahead and take notes, you can do that. An adaptation is any inheritable trait that increases an organism's ability to survive and reproduce in its given environment. Okay, what is the difference between an adaptation and a variation? Well, variation is not. It's going to be a trait, and it's going to be a trait that is different amongst organisms of the same species, but that trait may not necessarily be an adaptation. So variations can be adaptations. Again, adaptations, they originate from genetics. Um, One of the things that Darwin really professed was that it's not necessarily going to be the strongest species that's going to survive, nor the most intelligent. Sometimes the environment will select for a different adaptation, but it is the organism that is the most responsive to change.